Thank you, Renee. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey this morning. So I'm going to start by exploring what is the soul, and then we're going to look a little bit about how the mind works, and there'll be opportunity for some interaction towards the end of the session. And then I'm going to look at what our purpose is to develop this, to live in this unity of life, what we call the universal brotherhood. I'm going to just spend a couple of slides looking at that. So I'd like to start with a little poem by Rumi. And I think it's quite poignant to what we're talking about. So he says, "Remember what I said. I said, don't leave, for I am your friend. In the mirage of the world, I am the fountain of life. Even if you leave in anger and stay away for 1,000 years, you will return to me, for I am your goal. I said, don't be content with worldly promises, for I am the tabernacle of your contentment. I said, do not go upon the dry land, for I am the sea without a shore. I said, O bird, do not fly into the hunter's nest. Come towards me, for I am the power that moves your wings, that lifts you through the sky. I said, they'll capture you and put you on ice. I am the fire and the warmth of your true yearning. I said, they will cover you with water and clay. You'll forget that I am your taintless beginning. I said, no one can tell how my work will manifest, for I create the world from all sides. Let your heart's light guide you to my house. Let your heart's light show you are that we are one. Let your heart's light show you that we are one. I think Rumi, for me, always strikes a very strong note in his poems. It really inspires one to look within oneself for the answers rather than without oneself. There's another, when I was searching for ideas about the soul, this is another poem that came up in a theosophical magazine that I came across. The author of this is unknown, but I think it's very pertinent as well. When we let the soul speak, we put true colour into our life. When we let the soul speak, we change direction to the soul's direction. When we let the soul speak, we live with purpose, the soul's purpose. When we let the soul speak, we start to really live. The soul already knows that which the mind is desperately seeking to understand. The soul already knows that which we have not remembered in this lifetime. The soul already knows and can, if allowed, remind us. Let the soul speak. So we're speaking at a very deep level of perception here, from the soul. And as Renee said in the introduction, there's many things that get in the way of us hearing our soul. In fact, we're so used to living in a life with a mind that distracts us with anxieties and worries and fears wants and desires, that the soul has got no chance of being heard. So what I'd like to focus a little bit on this morning is, how do we get to listen to the soul? So the first question, of course, is, what is the soul? Does anybody know what the soul is? It's not a trick question, but good. Well, there's a couple, so it's probably worth spending a bit of time looking at what we mean by soul. In the Theosophical Glossary, or the Theosophical Encyclopedia, it says the soul is a non-physical principle that is said to animate living things. It is also sometimes equated with the inner self of an individual. So, sound familiar? The Encyclopedia Britannica and the Principles of Psychology defines the soul in this way. The word soul is commonly used as a translation of the Greek psyche or the Latin anima. Terms used by Greek philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, as well as the New Testament and later scholars and philosophers. It is understood as a non-corporal entity that lies behind our objective sense of self. In this sense, the discussion of self differs somewhat from that of soul, in that the former is often a direct attempt to describe the experience of the self, whereas the soul is frequently regarded as an hypothetical entity that we do not directly experience, and the existence of which are not even seen. As William James wrote, by the soul is always meant something behind the present thought, another kind of substance, existing in a non-phenomenal plane. I thought it puts it quite well, really. I know it's quite wordy. So soul is commonly distinguished from spirit. So spirit is regarded as a more basic entity than the soul. So the spirit essentially is our ultimate self. That's what we call our ultimate self. Spirit is the ultimate reality of who we really are. And the soul simply is a reflection of the spirit into reality. The soul is a vehicle of the spirit or the Atman. And that's all the soul is. The vehicle of our spirit or our Atman. So you can look in the dictionary, and one of the definitions of soul is a vehicle. So it's like getting in your car. Have you ever noticed when you get in your car, your whole personality changes? So it is with the spirit. As it's reflected through the soul, it changes. So it's different from the soul. It's unique. So each person's soul is a unique reflection of the spirit. There's only one spirit, but there's countless souls. So this is what in Theosophy we call the spiritual soul. That's the soul that is the vehicle of the spirit. But there's other souls as well. That's what makes it quite tricky, because when we're talking about the soul, we can be talking about quite different parts of our reality. So the word soul is, as I said earlier, is an ancient word. Now you can go back to Plato, Thomas Aquinas. They all used the concept of soul to explain the same reality which I just explained to you, that it's the vehicle of the spirit. And all the religions have a concept of soul, a term for soul. For example, in Judaism they call it nephesh, the soul. In Christianity, it's called the psyche or the anima. In Islam, it's called nafs, N-A-F-S. So I don't know if I pronounced that completely correctly. And in Islam, they also have a different word. They have a word for the rational soul, the animal soul, and the vegetable soul. So they've defined it in quite some detail. In Hinduism, they've also defined the soul under different terms as well. They use the concepts you often hear in yoga, like Manomaya Kosha, which is the mental soul. Vijnamaya Kosha, which is the intelligent sheath, or the intelligent soul. Annamaya Kosha, which is the sheath of bliss. And Shukshya Mapadi, the subtle body, or Krana Upadi, the causal body, or Karana Sharira is another name for the causal body. There's all these different terms in these different religions and these different philosophies. In Chinese, they call the soul Ipo. So it's a term that's used globally. Yes, Tim?
Are you familiar with the Buddhist concept that there is no soul?
Yes, I am.
Can you reconcile that with just other beliefs that say there is a soul?
I disagree. I think the Buddhists just won't admit there's a soul. They certainly believe in reincarnation. So, this would be a really good dialogue to have with a Buddhist. And I'd love to have a Buddhist here. There was one at Adia. I should have had a good... And what's his name? Ananda. He was Dutch, so Hollander was referring to his Dutch heritage, Hollander, Ananda. We might invite him here sometime. He's good. Yes, Cynthia.
What's being said coming through the past meditation, which is Theravada Buddhist, is there is no soul in the body.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's quite a difference.
It does, yes. So it's not negating the idea of soul. We're going to look more at the different types of souls shortly. So the theosophical view is, theosophy regards the soul as an intermediate, non-physical principle that serves as a vehicle of the spirit, or Atman, as I just explained. It has three aspects, or parts. The Buddhic, or the spiritual soul. The mind, or manas, is the human soul, which is identical with Aquinas' rational soul. And then the karma, it's K-A-M-A, not karma, it's K-R-M-A, is the animal soul. So the manas, or mind, has a dual nature. While the lower mind attaches itself to karma, it's the animal soul, when the latter separates itself from the higher principle after death of the physical body. So I've got a bit of a diagram which we can explore, which hopefully won't confuse you. So this is directly from, I think, Blavatsky's interpretation of the different souls that we have. So it starts off with Atma at the top. I don't know if it doesn't seem to want to reflect on the screen. But Atma at the top is synonymous with spirit. So that's our essential nature. So we are all spirit. There's only one spirit. Okay, that in spirit embodies Buddhi, which is the soul of spirit. So it's very difficult to describe Buddhic in intellectual terms, but the best explanation I've heard is that Buddhi is a reflection of the soul. A reflection of the spirit. Buddhi is a reflection of Atma. It's not Atma. And it's a little bit like looking at yourself in the mirror. So you can see a reflection of yourself in the mirror, yet the reflection isn't you. But for all intents and purposes, they look identical. But they're not. The reflection is quite separate from you. So this is the same nature as the buddhi. The buddhi isn't the spirit, it's a reflection. It is like a reflection of the spirit. And this is called, by Blavatsky, the spiritual soul, or the vehicle of Atma. It's like we get in our car, we go into a vehicle. The spirit moves into the Buddhic nature, its soul, and it is different from just pure spirit. It's no longer pure spirit. That's our spiritual soul. So when I talk about listening to the soul, this is the soul that I'm talking about listening to. This is our real self, as much as we can get to before we slip into the spiritual nature, or what I guess many of the sages call into nirvana, into that one reality. But there's other souls. There's the Buddhic nature then reflects itself into the mind nature. So it's like the soul puts on another vehicle, another soul. And this is where most of us spend our time, in the human soul, the mind, the manas as it's called in classical theosophy. So when we're living our everyday life, we're generally focused or awakened or conscious or aware at the mind level. Not all the time, but generally when we're still, this is where our awareness rests, in the mind. But this soul has two aspects to it. It's a reflection of the Buddhic nature. So this is often called in theosophy the higher mind, or the Buddhi minus. But it can also associate itself with the animal soul, which is what is often called in theosophy the lower mind. Now when you, and we have all those qualities within us, like as a human body, we have an animal nature. We inherit that as part of being human. We have been given the mind, a mental capacity. And our tendency is to spend time between the animal soul and the human soul, which distracts us. For example, where does worry come from? Any guesses? Yeah, so it's from the mind. So worry generally is a repeated concern over something. It's a loop of mental activity. And often we can't get out of it, and that's why we have sleepless nights, until we learn how to get out of that mental loop. And anxiety is very similar. Anxiety is often, fear of something that's going to happen, or fear of something that has happened. It's the same. It's a mental pattern that continues. So when we look much closer at the mind, we see that the mind is generally, it's a matrix of mental patterns. In fact, the movie The Matrix is quite a good analogy for the mind. Do you remember seeing The Matrix? It's probably 20 years old now, I suppose. The movie, it's suddenly when someone wakes up and realizes they've been locked in this matrix, this dream, for their whole life. And suddenly they wake up and they're out of the dream. So the first movie was good, the other two are rubbish, but the first movie sort of was a good analogy of what we're talking about here. This matrix, and we're caught in this matrix. And this matrix is one of our own making. It's very much a mind that we've created through our beliefs that we've taken on board, through patterns of thinking that we've created. And it's even said that in past lives, we've created tendencies and patterns which form part of the matrix of the mind that we're born with in this life. So when we're dealing and looking with the mind, we're not looking at just the mind that's been developed and created in this life. It's a mind we've created over all the many incarnations that we have. So different philosophies call these things different, have different names for them. And Buddhism, it's skandhas, and the yoga philosophy, it's samskaras. In Western psychology, it's different again. But they all recognise these patterns. Even quantum reality now recognises patterns we create within our mind. So our mind, our mental impulse flows through these patterns, like a record player playing a tune. To break the pattern, we've got to almost move the synapses within our brains so that they start flowing in different ways. And this is why in mental health, a long time ago, they used to give people shock treatment, because that would forcibly try and make them change their mental patterns of thinking. It was a horrific treatment, but this is the idea behind shock treatment, to try and change the way we think. And anyone that's tried to change their habits knows how immensely difficult it is. It's really one of the hardest things to do in life. Change the way you think, change the way you eat, change the way you live. Those are easier than just changing the way you think about something. Being willing to look at something with an open mind, without your memory or your belief system imposing filters upon what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. So do you understand what I'm talking about here about different types of souls? So that we've got the spiritual soul, which is ultimately where we're trying to wake up in. When we talk about the Mahatmas, what distinguishes a Mahatma or an adept from us is simply that they work from the spiritual soul. And we largely work from the human soul or the animal soul. So to become a Mahatma, the power of the animal soul has to be lost. You have to overcome the animal soul. So what's the animal soul? The animal soul is our animal nature, our desires. It's our wants, it's our strong ego to just look after the self, rather than be focused on the whole community, the whole world that we live in. Like if I look at Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister, she impressed me because she's a person that looks at community, at society as a whole, rather than the self. Politicians are a really good example of looking at the different levels of where people are as far as their interests. Is the politician interested in society, or are they interested in fulfilling their own ideological ideas? We have to reflect that back to ourselves, of course. So this is just a model to help to describe different types of souls that we have. Today we look at it, body, mind, soul, spirit, which is the general terminology that's used. So we're a spirit with a soul, a mind and a body, and all those are distinct vehicles within ourselves. Another diagram that I like, some of you have got this poster in your branches. This one's just a copy of the HPB poster. I think it explains that whole concept a little clearer. Like if you look at each of these arms, it's sort of highlighted on the left there. So how the arms all look separate here, they're like rays of light. So this is our individuality. So you could say this is our body, our emotions, our mind. And at that level, we see ourselves as separate entities, separate individuals. And it very much reflects the notion of how we see the world today. I'm John, look, there's Renee. Separate people. But in reality, if you go further towards the centre, you start seeing a blurring of the lines of individuality and a connection between each person. So even at the highest mind level, there's a connection between people. It's what we call the Buddhimanas, the higher mind. And you go further on and then you get into the spiritual soul level, which is where we're all, there's no distinction really between us. It's where, it's at that level of reality that the soul speaks, that we hear the soul. And it's that Rumi said in his poem, everything that you need to know is within me. Just connect with that soul. Just connect with me. And it's there. Yet our mind says, no, I've got to read all about this, I've got to know this. And we look at it at that level and we rationalise it and try to understand something. And that's a part of our journey. I'm not negating that, but that's a part of our journey. But ultimately, we're going to only really know the truth when we can listen and speak with the soul, within ourselves. So what is the mind? Mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness group under thought, will, and feeling. During deep sleep, ideation ceases on the physical plane and memory is in abeyance. Thus, for the time being, mind is not, because the original thought, which the ego manifests ideation and memory on the material plane, has been temporarily ceased to function. This is a quote from H.P. Blavatsky. There's no wonder I like sleep so much. So Blavatsky further writes, Manas is jewel, and she calls it, she has slightly different terms for it. She calls it lunar in the lower, solar in the upper portion. She says, that is to say, it is attracted to the higher aspect through buddhi. So the solar mind is attracted to the higher aspect through buddhi, and its lower descends into and listens to the voice of the animal soul, full of selfish and sensual desires. And herein is contained the mystery of the adepts as a profane man's life, also that of the post-mortem separation of the divine from the animal man. That's from The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2. It's important to understand this concept of the mind, how it splits itself into the desire mind and the higher mind. Just to be aware of it is enough as to understand it. So going on, the nature of the mind, it is a product of a lifetime of tendencies and patterns, and I sort of explained this a little earlier. Current experiences and thought patterns, focus and will are an important role in the future of mental stages. Being aware of our thoughts and feelings are important. And often this is the third stage of realizing that the mind is quite separate from who you are. I want to try a little experiment with you. So I want us all together to chant Om 3 times. I'm going to just explain how to chant Om. So usually Om is written as OM, but it's not the way it's chanted. The way to chant Om is to consider it as A, U, M. So if we all chant Om, we're chanting Aum in that way. So it definitely sounds like an A, a U, and an M. So it's Aum. And the importance is to not place stress on the A or the M, but to chant them in equal length. So Aum. That's it. So did any of you able to observe what was going on in your mind without becoming attached to the thoughts that were going on in your mind. Yeah. Any comments at all? Yeah, Catherine.
I was just observing the sounds.
Around you. Yeah. Betty?
As well.
I observed the sound moving from the lower in my stomach area up into the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
Probably still.
I could feel the ego being challenged.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So there was a light with the sound,
Yep.
clarity and the oneness.
A clarity
And the oneness.
and the oneness. Yeah. Om has lots of side effects. Like it's very powerful for helping to still the mind. So it's a good tool to use, for example, before you're going into some sort of meditation practice. This is just to chant Om a few times, and you notice your mind quietens down. But the other effect is that suddenly you become much more aware. But it's not so much with the mind you're becoming aware, it's more you start to realize that your spiritual soul is aware of what's going on in the mind and your emotions. So it's a way of connecting with your spiritual soul. Just chanting Om. Sometimes it takes time to recognize this, but through repeated practices of meditation, like I've meditated for years, and often meditation for me became a struggle with my mind. I'm trying to still the mind, and you meditate to still the mind, and the mind just gets stronger, or you fall asleep, but what eventually I sort of clicked and learned that what is it that realizes that I'm having a struggle? What is it that recognizes that this mind is constantly active? What is it that, is this mind? So suddenly I realize, oh, there's another part of me here that's observing what is going on. And the mind is just trying to distract this other self. And this is a bit of a clue to connecting with your spiritual soul. You could be deluding yourself, of course, but connecting with the spiritual soul is essentially what you're trying to do when you meditate. Like Madame Blavatsky in her Voice of the Silence says that, to reach the voice of the silence, which is the same thing, it's connecting with your soul, is you need to practice focus, awareness, concentration. So it's inner focus. It's all it is, without distractions. And then she gives you all these things now. If you hear the buzz of a firefly, well, you're still stuck in the mind. So she gives you all these hints to sort of give you a guide to when you've actually got there. And then you say, when you've got to that voice of the silence, it's like hearing a roar. It's not the voice of the silence. It's not the silent voice at all. I had quite a period where I got into Carl Jung. He's quite an amazing philosopher, really, or psychologist. And this quote's attributed to him. He says, filling the conscious mind with ideal conceptions is the characteristic of Western theosophy, but not the confrontation with the shadow and the world of darkness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. I thought this was a very insightful quote. Like, a lot of you here have done the self-transformation process that we do. And it's embracing that part of yourself that we usually try to ignore. Unless we're willing to embrace and open ourselves up to what he calls our darkness, our shadow, how are we ever going to really understand who we are? Often it's our shadow that's preventing us from moving forward. So it's important to be willing to look at it. It's not about judging it. It's just about being aware of it, letting it bubble up so that we can deal with it. That's why we have personal relationships, so we can see our shadows. That's why I have committees, you know. All think of all sorts of things, you know, in the workplace, everywhere. There's always opportunities to get to understand our dark sides, what our shadows say. And it's not, when it's conscious. Conscience. That's the conscience is our spiritual self trying to talk to us. It's a good example. You know, how often do we want to do something, and something within ourselves saying, don't do that. Not a good idea. I don't know if it ever says, not a good idea, but it says no. And how often do we ignore it? And then, you know, then regret it. But our rational mind tries to justify it. No, this will be good for me. I need this. I have to do this. This is the nature of the mind. So our spiritual soul never stops talking to us. We just forgotten how to hear it. We just stop listening to it because our focus in the mental world is so strong. Our wants and needs are so strong that, you know, perhaps the spiritual soul gets tired of trying to talk to us. But as Rumi said, you know, we're all going to return home to that spiritual soul eventually. There's no other way to go. Yeah, Katarina.
So do you think that all the violence in media that we are exposed to are our needs to confront the shadow?
Partly it is, yes. Partly it's the needs and wants of the journalists or the media itself, which today is managed very much through the media organisation. But it's an opportunity for us to explore and get to know ourselves. The whole concept of, what is it called? It's alternative facts or fake, what was it, Betty? Or fake news. You know, it's interesting because, you know, how often do you realise that what you hear for years has been fake news? But now the concept has been really put in our face so we can see it in the political sense. So it's a wake-up call as well. You can see it in a negative light, or you can see this as an opportunity for us to look at our own beliefs and ideas, and how true is this, and how much of the stuff that's in our memory and our belief system is fake news or fake reality.
We have to go beyond what we think is a fact.
We've got to go to the spiritual soul, which is beyond rational thinking. So how do we get there? You know? How do we hear the spiritual soul? What are your thoughts?
Surrender.
Surrender? Yep.
Be quiet.
Listen. Quieten the mind.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, get out of the way. Mm-hmm. It's hard, isn't it, Robert? The minds are so strong. Meditation is the most popular method that I know of for learning to understand the different souls. Yep. Not attached. Yeah. Non-attachment is one of the main disciplines. It's letting go of outcomes and expectations. So allowing what's supposed to happen. So not being attached to what you want or what's going to be the result of anything we see. Now, in a world today that's a bit hard, but it's all there as part of the lesson process. Juliet, I think I saw you.
Yeah. And through love and a sense of unity.
Yep. Love is certainly, for me, an aspect of the spiritual soul. Love it that at that level is about the connectedness of everything. But of course there's lots of different levels of love as well.
At our reactions.
Being aware of our reactions. One of the suggestions of people who want to go through the spiritual journey is to keep a spiritual diary, which is a sort of a mechanism for reflecting on what's happened in your day. So it's not about, I went for lunch with, Peter and we had a coffee and we talked about this. It's more about your observation of what's going on within you during the day. So you might say, for example, look, I bumped into this stranger in the street. I don't know why, but I stopped to talk to him. And I realised that this was a person I had a deep connection with. So it's about looking at the significance of what's going on in your day. Like I had an argument with somebody. So why did I have an argument? Why did I argue something? What am I attached to that caused me to argue? So this is the sort of psychology of what you're trying to do. So it's not ever turning around and saying, this person caused this to happen to me. It's about, why did I react like this about this? And this then becomes an opportunity for you to look at yourself. Why am I doing this? Why am I holding on to this? And then letting that go. And as I said, relationships are often the best mechanism for looking at this. But spiritual diary is a common mechanism for helping you to understand and to grow. I often talk today about looking at our values. What are our personal values? What are the values in the society we live in? What are the religious values? But most of all, what do we consider as universal values? Values that we consider are important, the most important values. Like these could be things like, for me, they're things like respect for all life, peace, but those sort of values. But if you consider your universal values, and they conflict with your personal values or your social values, suddenly you find yourself out of balance. And there's a sort of a dis-ease that happens within you, and possibly disease as well eventually will grow, because there's a conflict between, perhaps your animal soul, your mental soul, and your spiritual soul. And unless those can be lined up, then you get disease of one sort or another. It could be psychological, could be physical, and so on. So it's things you have to look at within yourself. So no one can point out and say, look, you need to do this. It's about us looking at ourselves and working on ourselves. It's not about judgment either. It's about observation and understanding. If we see something that we're not happy about, that is part of our pattern, it's not about judging it, it's just being aware of it. And next time you see it come up, say, okay, it's happened, I'm aware of it now. And then as it comes up again and again, you have the opportunity to do something about it. So these are all methods of helping to awaken ourselves up to the soul consciousness, the spiritual soul consciousness. But before we can get there, we need to be willing to look at that shadow part of ourselves, which Jung pointed to, and be honest with ourselves. That's the journey. And this is what Blavatsky talks about. So I'm going to move on a little bit to the main objective of the Theosophical Society was to form a nucleus, recognising the unity of all life without distinction. So the object is to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood. And that's, there's a whole dialogue you can have around the words there, which is a dialogue that's happening all around the world at the moment. But I'm looking at how we do this. To do this practically, it is necessary to become conscious of the reality as experienced from the spiritual soul. So this universal brotherhood we're talking about is a reality from the spiritual soul. For us, it's just an intellectual concept, or from the mental soul, it's just an intellectual concept. It has no real meaning unless you've had the opportunity to experience that. that connectedness. And people have these experiences. We all have our heart moments, our insights, and we can experience that unity. And the experience never goes away, although we can't explain it. It's like a feeling that you can't explain. So this is, when the Theosophical Society, this is what was the paramount reason for starting it, to create an organisation where people came together and had experienced this unity and lived and worked together with this conscious connection or this unity in mind. And it's never been completely successful. After the first 15 years or so, the Mahatmas were quite disparaged because, they said on this particular object, this society was a dead failure. And it's because it's so hard to do for humans. This is a real struggle, yes, Don?
I think that if we have a thorough understanding of the third objective,
Yep.
the automatic byproduct of that is the first objective automatically falls into place.
That's true. If you really follow the whole process of self-transformation, which is implied in the third object.
And examine the unexplained rules of
Nature.
and the powers latent in all of us.
Yeah.
If we can grasp that firmly and get a better understanding, then we automatically just become connected to everyone and everything.
Yeah. Well said. So it's an ideal we have, and it's the making that ideal the reality, which is our challenge. And it's constantly there. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about what universal brotherhood means. Now, I came across this because I'm doing some research at the moment to try and explain why we need to look at changing the term universal brotherhood because of its sexist connotation. But I found this as I was searching. This is from Mahatma Letter number 10 to AP Synod. So the important part is a universal brotherhood, that is an association of affinities, of strong magnetic yet dissimilar forces and polarities, centered around one dominant idea, is necessary for successful achievements in occult science. What one will fail to do, the combination may well achieve. So universal brotherhood isn't about us all thinking the same, being the same lovely people. It's about recognizing diversity within the unity and the beauty of diversity, because it shows us the different aspects of the whole. So it's welcoming diversity and not trying to block it out, which is different to opposition and disagreement. So it's more about creating that magnetic link within ourselves, between ourselves, knowing that we're all working for the same, to try and help humanity awaken to a real realization of who they really are. So that's the message behind the Theosophical Society. And we're trying to help humanity to awaken to who they really are. Unless we can demonstrate that within our own branches and with our own relationship, how can we be effective on a human scale? So just imagine if we could do this within our own little families, our own little branches, our own sections, our own groups. That would really change the world. People would come into our branches and say, wow, this is an amazing place. I want to be part of this family. So I'll leave those thoughts with you and thank you all for this little journey.